Hello everyone, and welcome to the June edition of the Farmers Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Klopechka, agronomist with Farmers Supply Association. We're taping this program for June on June the 5th. I think a lot of things were going on. Really started Monday, so June the 1st, we've been really busy all week, a lot of things going on. You know, I've talked throughout the spring about how we'll get 1 or 2 days, to work, and then we get rains and several days out of the field. Well, we've actually got a good run of a week in so far this week, so a lot of things are happening with rice. There's actually still just a little bit of planting going on and maybe a little bit more to go yet still. We're also right in weed control season. As we get ready to flood these fields up, as this one behind us is already flooded up, but as farmers get ready to flood up, they want to make sure they're as clean as they can be as they go into flood, so we're worrying about that. Obviously, before the flood, we talk every year about the need for urea fertilization to go out on dry ground, so we've been working on that as well, and then getting that flood out there. So it's a real busy time for rice farmers as they try to shape that crop up. And all of these things we're doing right now are big keys as far as setting our yield potential. So they got to be done right. They need to be done timely. So hopefully all those things are getting done like they're supposed to. I'll kind of go 1 through 4 on those things that I mentioned there. First, planting. It's getting late. We're in June. There's been a little rice planted this week. And actually, I think I've had questions about maybe still a little bit being planted next week if the weather will cooperate. So, we'll just see how the weather goes and if these guys really do follow through and plant rice. I mean, it's not totally unusual to plant rice in that second week of June. So, we'll see how much is going to actually be planted. A lot of that depends on how much rain we get and everything like that. And talking about late rice planting like this, if you don't want to plant rice, I got a good excuse for you. If you want to still plant some rice, I got a good excuse for you. So, we can still make rice, a good rice at these late planting dates. We got to have a good fall, a good September really to help make that crop, but it can be done. I ran a DD50 program today looking at Rice Tech 753, the hybrid, and if you're going to be planting rice this late, I certainly think a hybrid is what you want to go with. But if you plant a hybrid and it emerges on the 15th of June, so if we planted Monday the 8th and it came up in a week, emerged on the 15th, the projected 20% moisture date would be the 19th of September. So, that's right at the borderline, and when sometimes we'll get a big cool spell about the 20th of September. So, we're right at that point. If we have a good September, you can still make a good crop. If we don't, if we have a cool spell in that first half of September, it could be tough to make that crop. So again, an excuse to plant, excuse not to plant, depending on what you want to do. Next thing I want to talk about is weed control. We talk about this a lot because it's so important. Bobby Huey, who's a retired extension rice specialist, always used to say you can't make a good rice crop unless you get all the grass out of there. So grass is number one on trying to control these weeds. Our residual herbicides have worked very well this year because we had so much rain to keep them active. But that rain has kind of gotten sporadic and less here lately, so those residuals are running out on this, rice that's still not flooded yet. So, rice weed control may be a little bit tougher here as we, kind of move into the late part of the season. Again, grass control is the big deal. Number one on the list. We've also got sedges and black seeds, but really I think grasses are number one. Just want to go through the major grasses and what I use as my go-to materials when I'm trying to control these. Barnyard grass, when we're getting into these later part of the season, later part of the pre-flood season, and we got some bigger barnyard grass out there. The two things I normally look at are Rice Star or Regiment. And with Rice Star, we usually got to have pretty wet ground for it to be as effective as we like to. Maybe Regiment not quite so much, but we like to have good moisture and get these materials out there in a good way, get good coverage and everything before we go to flood. But looking again, Regiment and Rice Star are my two go-to choices when I have bigger grass that I'm looking at in rice fields. Next grass I want to talk about is Springle Top. Less choices here, and pretty much when you get the bigger Springle Top, or really most sizes of Springle Top, you really need some Rice Star in your mix. So Rice Star is kind of my go-to choice again for Springle Top. And again, Rice Star works much better if the ground's kind of muddy, at least good moisture and kind of dark on top. You really want it to be at least that wet to get good activity out of Rice Star. But again, Springle Top, go-to choice is Rice Star. Broadleaf signal grass, I'm going to talk about broadleaf signal grass and crabgrass. Both of these are a little bit intolerant to a flood. I mean, may not totally control them, but they can get suppressed in a flood. But if you got broadleaf signal grass, my go-to #1 choice is something with facet in it. Facet is usually outstanding on broadleaf signal grass, and especially if you get that water, get the facet out there and get some water across it, it can be very effective and slowly wither that broadleaf signal grass away. So I really like watching that. And finally, crabgrass, which is becoming more and more of a problem. And crabgrass typically hadn't been that big of an issue with rice, but it seems to be getting worse every year. Again, it's not real tolerant of a flood, but it can kind of hang around if you don't have a deep flood out there. So with crabgrass, usually rice star facet's kind of my go-to choices to start with on crabgrass. So those are some of the the grasses we worry about and some of the go-to herbicides for them as the grass gets bigger and close to flood. Sedges, yellow nut sedge is of course the easier one to control. Gambit or Permit Plus are both really good on it. But flat sedges, the annual sedges, those are more difficult to control usually because they've got resistance to the ALS herbicides. So what we generally look for, depending on how big they are, the situation you're in, propanil can be very good on it, especially on smaller stuff. Ricebow's got real good activity on it. Propanil Basagran combination's very good on it. Loyant is outstanding on it. You know, Loyant was such a big disappointment to us a couple of years ago on barnyard grass, but Loyant is outstanding on both pigweeds and flat sedges, so it's an outstanding choice. And you can cut that rate back to 12 ounces, which lessens the probability of injury from that Loyant. And then finally, when you get to the right window, 2,4-D can have some pretty good activity on it as well. You know, it may not control it totally, but at least it'll kind of knot it up and keep it from being real competitive. So that's another really good choice there. The black seeds, those are the weeds that we get docked for at the dryer or at the elevator when you take it in. We're talking about morning glory, coffee bean, and indigo. So those are the things that I'm talking about when I talk about black seeds. Several good herbicide choices here. 2,4-D can be an excellent choice if you can use it. Propanil Grandstand's very good on all three of them. Blazer on coffee beans, Permit Plus and Gambit have some activity on some of these weeds, especially the coffee bean and the indigo. So those are all some possibilities with the black seeds. And we got a little more time with black seeds to control them. So that's our weed situation. Fertilize. Again, as we've talked about many times in the past, we want to get that urea out on dry ground. It's much more efficient that way, so we want to get it out on dry ground, get that water across it, and when that water goes across it, if the ground is dry, it kind of incorporates it into the ground, which protects it from loss. So that's why we want to get it out on dry ground. Looking at rates, kind of the common rate now is about 250 pounds of urea. That seems like a good standard number. If you look at the University of Arkansas recommendations, for the hybrids it's 260 pounds, for the non-hybrids it's 230 for most of them. So a good happy medium is 250 pounds of urea. If you don't get it on dry ground, you know, some people, if that fails and it stays wet and you get a big rain and flood out there, you can spoon feed it in the water. Usually it's going to take 400 to 500 pound applications of urea into the water to compensate for the loss that you have in the water. So that's what we look at if we do have to spoon feed. We don't want to have to put it on wet ground, but sometimes we do. If you put it on wet ground and it looks like the weather pattern is going to change and dry up, then you can let it dry up and then run the flood across it and again try to get that incorporation. But if the weather pattern just stays wet, you just have to put it on mud and run that water across it and get the best results you can. So again, we want to avoid those bad choices, but sometimes when the weather is rainy, that's all we can do. So that's with fertilizer. That's kind of where we're at with rice right now. Looking at the soybean situation, just want to touch on soybeans real quickly. We have a new herbicide technology. It's a couple of years old and it's called the Enlist technology. And we have a lot of farmers starting to grow that technology now because it's very good on pigweeds. So I want to just touch on that before I finish the program right here. Enlist is 2,4-D choline. It's a new formulation of 2,4-D and it's very good on pigweeds. And the good thing about the Enlist formulation is it's very stable. It doesn't get around, doesn't volatilize and get around like some other formulations of 2,4-D might. So that's why it's very good for our farmers to use. If you do use the Enlist technology, you do need to use the Enlist herbicides, not any of the old 2,4-Ds. Enlist 1 is just a 2,4-D choline by itself. Enlist Duo is a combination of the 2,4-D choline plus glyphosate or Roundup. So those are your choices right there. These soybeans are also tolerant to Liberty herbicide. So you've got Enlist or the 2,4-D choline, you've got the Liberty, and you've got the glyphosate you can use on these soybeans. Really, as far as resistance management, they recommend that you combine all three of those together. Use like an Enlist one, a Liberty, and a Roundup combination. That's very good for resistance management. And also, when these pigweeds start getting bigger, it's just better to have that three-way combination. It's very effective on bigger pigweeds. So it's again, it's a herbicide and technology that's going to help us a whole lot in the future. And again, you do need to use the Enlist one or the Enlist Duo and not any old formulation of 2,4-D because of that stability. And also just the labeling of the product. So that's kind of where we're at right now as we move into June, and hopefully things will develop real quickly here. I think with the hot, sunny weather we've been having a few days this week, that'll really help things get going. So until next month, this has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agri Report for June.